Madonna. And Madonna, we've been talking about things as we do this time every Friday.
Yeah.
And, well, we were talking about asthma. Well, we weren't talking about it, but we're going to talk about asthma now. We were talking about a few things a matter of minutes ago, but the asthma solution. Now, is it right that it costs no money?
Absolutely.
How do you do that?
Good old-fashioned sunshine.
Ah, the old sunshine.
So asthma has increased by 300% in the last 2 decades. So it's not something that's improving with medication and healthcare. It's something that's getting worse. And of course, how many of us are staying inside because we're scared of the sun these days?
Oh,
yeah.
Well, there you go.
So it's pretty huge. I was having a look at the Bureau of Statistics for Australians when I was on my way out here. And back in 2014, and once again, things tend to get worse rather than better, they were saying that 1% of Australians had severe vitamin D deficiency.
Right.
And I thought, well, 1%, that doesn't sound too bad. But, you know, that's 240,000 Australians.
That's 1%.
1%.
Wow, that's quite a bit,
It is. 17% of Australians are deficient, and that's 4 million. It's actually 4,080,000 or something like that. And this is only going by the recommended, you know, so the RDA, they want us to have 50 nanomillimoles or whatever it is, nanomoles. So when we go get it checked at the doctor. Now, if we've got autoimmune disease or dementia or depression or anything, we actually need much higher levels.
Yeah.
So we would want it to be, well, in a perfect world, you'd want it to be 100 to 150.
So now you've got me thinking, have I got dementia? Because we were talking a few moments ago and I said, oh, I've been to the doctor a couple of times and he said, you've got to get that vitamin D.
Yeah.
You're not outside enough in the sun.
Yes.
And you said, well, maybe it's just not entering my body.
Exactly. So there's lots of things that block the sun. So, you know, even when we have tinted windscreens in the car, that tint stops the vitamin D absorbing into our body. Sunglasses stop the absorption. Obviously, hats stop the absorption. Long, you know, clothes and things, sunscreen. So all of the things we're doing on a daily basis to protect us from the sun is actually making us quite vitamin D deficient.
So what do you think? We should all spend more time in the sun or actually go on vitamin D tablets?
Well, I think it's very hard these days because there is such a major fear of skin cancers and melanomas. You know, we can't be going out there in the middle of the day. That's just silly. And it is the early and late time of day when the vitamin D is safer. So, you know, it is really before that 10 o'clock in the morning and after the 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's really important. But the studies with asthma and vitamin D are really quite huge. So there was one study done where they looked at 1,000 kids with asthma for 4 years and found those with the vitamin D deficiency at the outset were more likely to have an asthma attack that required a trip to the hospital. So that's just vitamin D alone. So then they were looking at pregnant mothers and they found that the combination of vitamin D deficiency plus poor diet gives you 5 times the chance of having an asthmatic child by the time they're 5 years old. So there seems to be a massive link. So I think another thing about our diet is that because it's low fat, we're not getting, you know, a lot of people aren't eating eggs and creams and cheeses and all sorts of animal products, and animal products are quite high in vitamin D.
Right. Yep.
So when you sort of switch things around to being the low fat side of things, our vitamin D levels are lower. So therefore, once again, it's another area we're not getting them from. And once again, we're talking about allergens. Things like eggs, they're in the top 8 allergies in Australia. So people get very fearful of these things when they've had a response at some stage, which is fair enough. But, you know, a lot of the foods that are quite high in these nutrients, because we are changing the molecular structure of our food supply because of, you know, antibiotics and hormones and pesticides and all sorts of things, it means that we're not actually getting the nutrients out of them that we used to, you know, 30, 40 years ago. Another thing that's sort of just interesting about vitamin D is the quality is really hard to, it's hard to get good quality vitamin D capsules. There's something about vitamin D. I was at a seminar a couple of years ago where one of the researchers on vitamin D was talking, and she was saying it's hard to get an encapsulation process where the vitamin D doesn't get free radical damage. So it means that a lot of vitamin D products on the market, we might actually not be getting the therapeutic dose that we think we're getting.
How do you know what product, the product you're going to get vitamin D, how would you pick that one is right for you as opposed to this one over here you shouldn't touch?
Well, one proof would be in the pudding is do your vitamin D levels go up in the blood test? So that's one thing. But another thing is dose. You actually need a lot more than what recommended.
Right, yeah.
So a lot of people come in and they say, oh yeah, it showed up at the doctor, so I'm taking 1,000 units a day. So they're called international units in vitamin D. 1,000 units, I've got to say, that's equivalent to 10 minutes in the sunshine. That'll never increase the vitamin D levels when you are deficient. And the reason being that vitamin D is so important for the body. They have found that vitamin D is connected to DNA genes for cancer. It's connected to the production of neurotoxins in the brain that cause dementia. It's connected to low serotonin levels and dopamine levels that lead to anxiety and depression. Vitamin D is just one of these things. There are thousands of studies out there these days that you can look up about vitamin D. It's really quite massive. And so, back to your question, what's good for you? Firstly, try it, see if it works. You know, if your doctor's happy to do blood tests and you don't mind doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But this is my bias as a practitioner. I know that when I get in practitioner products, they have to be TGA regulated, so therefore they have the therapeutic dose.
Okay.
So when you're getting something from a supermarket, there's no regulations on those.
So can I say we should recommend to people, though, to get that little bit of sunshine. Don't go overboard.
Absolutely.
Don't get burnt. And protect yourself still, but get out there and get a little bit.
But get out there. Yeah, and to even diffuse through trees is good, you know, so that is going to be better, you know, so if you're in the middle of the day under a tree without actual sunshine, that without sunscreen and without hats is better for you than never getting never getting out in the sun.
Now, I've got an idea that might help people get out over the weekend. Ormiston House. They can head out there and have a look at that historic Ormiston House. Beautiful. It's at 277 Wellington Street, Ormiston, and you can take a tour of the house